You hear it before you know what it is. A voice riding the wind in a town where the wind is its own language. Not the siren though, that starts, too. A long mechanical howl that drags its knuckles along the duck butt. A human voice on a patrol car's loudspeaker rolling slowly down. Main. Greensburg take. Cover now. Everyone in Greensburg, take cover now. Porch lights blink on along Walnut and Grant. Screen doors slam. The sky has the odd, underwater green that only the planes understand. It is May 4th, 2007 late evening in Kiowa County, Kansas. Population a little over 1,400. Wheat not yet ready to cut. The air warm, thick, and volatile. The last of the light leans on the grain elevator. The big, well museum home of the world's largest hand-dug well. 109 feet to the bottom, 32 feet across still. Has its neon on, the letters humming, as if nothing has changed in the sky above it. At the National Weather Service office in Dodge City, the radar wraps a hook around Kiowa County, colors stacking like bruises. A forecaster with a headset says aloud what the screen already knows. A classic cyclic supercell, violent. On the internal chat, someone writes the phrase they do not use lightly. Tornado emergency for Greensburg. The warning goes out with an urgency that cuts through habit. On NOAA weather radio, a steady voice repeats the sentence twice, then again, unafraid of sounding alarmist. Because alarm is the point. In the hospital on the east side of town, a nurse named Lena tapes plastic over a window and tells Mrs. Hull in room 4 that they're moving downstairs. Now, please, take my hand. In a bungalow 2 blocks from the courthouse, a family clears a stairwell the way you clear a mine photo albums. The dog's leash, a Tupperware of batteries, the blanket that has seen every fever. In a plumbing shop off San 54, a man flips the breaker, pockets a flashlight, and locks the door because order is comfort. The deputy with the loudspeaker turns on to Garfield, his head out the window into the gusting air, and says it again. The town could fit inside a football stadium. Tonight, it feels larger than the sky. The first siren has already sounded. The second is the one that makes people run. In the west, lightning strobes and holds on a shape that is too big to make sense of clouds stitched to ground and a wall that has no edges. It wears the night like camouflage. Somewhere a child says it looks like a mountain moving, and that is not wrong. Power fleshies transformers giving up one after another paint the edges of the thing, electric blue for half-breath. The pressure changes in little increments, as if the air is practicing how to be less air. The forecaster in Dodge City feels his own heartbeat in his fingers. The velocity couplet on the scope is so tight it looks like a knot. His colleague drafts the phrase with no extra words and hits send. A large and extremely dangerous tornado is moving northeast toward Greensburg. The tone is flat because flat is respectful. On the scanner, a storm spotter's voice breaks. It's a wedge. It's big. It's the whole horizon. Lena and 2 aides wheel one patient, then another, into an interior hallway. The lights flutter and go, and the generator catches. The building hums on a smaller, more hopeful key. Down the block, in a basement under a house that smells faintly of the morning's coffee, a man kneels on the concrete with his daughter on his lap, counting the seconds between thunder and the peculiar deeper growl that isn't thunder at all. He taught her this when she was 5 count, then divide by 5 for miles, but the math is wrong tonight, because the sound is not traveling. The sound is making the place it travels through. Take cover now. The patrol car passes the diner with the pie case that is made. Graveside meals, bearable for decades. Somewhere in the dark a dog whines, then falls silent, the way animals do when they know the order of things has shifted. The deputy has been on nights long enough to know every mailbox by shape. He hits the corner too fast and corrects, and says the words again, into a world that is beginning to turn from wind to force. On the Great Bend to Greensburg line, the scanner rattles with names of towns and mile markers. Voices pumping adrenaline like blood. The NWS office writes it out in a boilerplate no one has to think about anymore and then adds the line they almost never add. This storm is capable of producing a violent tornado. Seek shelter underground. The sirens die and are replaced by a hiss-like static, turning into voices. An old man who has not been to church in a decade pulls a quilt over his wife's shoulders and prays anyway. A jumble of half-remembered words that fit because every sentence that asks for mercy fits. A teenager with more sense than bravado yanks his little brother into the center of the house and wedges the mattress over them both. And because he is still a child, thinks about how stupid they'll look if nothing happens. The wedge is nearly 1.75 miles across. It is eating fields and fence lines, and the last calm of a state that knows about wind. In its path are houses with their roofs still vanity straight, a high school gym, a museum built around a hole. People once dug with their hands to find water in a dry place and found it. In its path are sirens and the deputy's voice, and the sense that, in a town where everyone knows everyone, there will be no strangers to the damage of what is coming. It is not yet 10 o'clock. When the tornado hits the southwest corner of Greensburg, it does not so much arrive as reveal itself, an edge crossing a street to become an address. Somewhere, the first window goes with a clap. Somewhere else, a wall exhales and bends inward like a curtain. The hospital's generator hiccups and steadies. The deputy stops in an intersection, empty of everything but rain and debris that already forgets that it used to be part of something, and says it one last time into a microphone that is shaking in his hand. The air tightens. In the basements and interior hallways and under stairwells, places built for winter coats and Christmas bins. Not for this breathing slows, because there is a moment when your body understands before your mind allows it that the atmosphere outside is no longer a place where you can move unremarked. The cell towers blink red, then nothing at all. Lightning flattens the town into a black and white photograph full of angles. The noise, when it announces itself, is not a train, because trains are a thing you can describe. It is a ripping open that is both sound and instruction. It is the sky accepting a new job. A kitchen chair lifts, bumps the ceiling, and disappears. A mailbox detaches and becomes a missile. A roof learns how to fly, and then forgets. The wedge lays its flank against the town and keeps coming. Everything that was anchored is tested, and everything that was only pretending finds itself airborne. An oak you could not have wrapped your arms around lifts at the roots like hair in a static field and lies down as if exhausted. A 2-story craftsman home whose trim someone repainted by hand last summer disassembles itself mid lumber and shingles and family photographs fanning out in sheets. The hallway in the hospital becomes the whole building as walls shift from abstraction to motion. Above ground, what people see lasts 2 seconds at a time, lit by lightning and power flashes. The wedge, which is not a shape so much as a moving absence. A pickup truck tumbling like a toy in a dryer. A garden shed hugging a telephone pole, learning what it is to be dragged and not to decide. Below ground, in the crawl spaces and dugouts, ears pop, then ring. A girl tries to open her mouth wide to make the pain pass, then forgets her own body when the floor patches itself with dirt from a foundation that never minded being the bottom of anything until tonight. In the NWS office, the velocity product is maxed out. Greens and reds braided in a signature that will make presentations later. The chat windows read like triage. Confirmed damage. Law enforcement reporting large tornado. Greensburg taking direct hit now. The phrase debris ball appears. Clinical as a diagnosis. Translated in living rooms too. It is throwing pieces of the town into the sky. The deputy gets pushed sideways in the intersection as if an enormous hand corrected him. He cannot see the hood of his car. His hand leaves the mic as if it has somewhere else to be. The siren poles sing not just their engines, but the poles themselves. Long metal tuning forks humming through a register that muscles remember. He watches a stoplight fold up like paper and fly. At the hospital, Lena counts 6 heads in her hallway, then 8. Then a number you cannot count, because counting means you are sure of the world for longer than half a second. She shouts above the roar, and the roar says the idea that shouting is a thing people do when they need to be heard from a foot away is quaint. Ceiling tiles lift in sections, swing, break. Wires hang like jungle vines. A ventilator alarms and dies. When the windows go in the ER, the glass is grit, and the grit is air. Someone's hand finds hers and squeezes until it hurts. And because pain has borders, the hurt helps. 2 blocks away, a basement fills with rain and dirt and something chemical that might be a neighbor's garage. The dog howls, once, then chooses silence again. The man with his daughter on his lap tightens his arms and feels the temperature drop. the way you do when a pressure cooker is opened. He thinks absurdly of the big well of the day he carried his daughter down the iron stairs of that hand-dug cylinder and told her the story of the town's beginnings, of men with shovels chasing water like faith. He thinks of depth and of the opposite of depth. The tornado, nearly 1.7 miles wide, burns across the town along a southwest due northeast line. Its core carrying winds estimated well over 200 miles per hour. Later, EF5 will be an American acronym that needs no translation in Greensburg. Now, the enhanced Fujita scale is irrelevant. You need only eyes and bones. Houses scrape off their slabs down to the last nailhead. A school bus flips and bangs its sides flat. A combine harvester moves a block and a half without deciding to. The big well museum brick and pride collapses to its chin. The well itself, a circle into the earth with a stone wall laid by human hands in 1888, endures like a sentence left unfinished. The hospital's south wall does not survive the introduction. Wind goes through the building like a new kind of light. Lena lies down on top of Mrs. Hole and becomes a roof. Far down the hall, a crash that is a language of metal tells where a gurney has decided to learn how to be an accordion. The generator shrieks and stops. It is as if the wind is eating sound. On the street grid, that meant neighbors and gossip yesterday. The tornado paints a negative. It leaves the tiny things chipped teacups. A shoe rather than the foot. A picture of someone in a yellow dress at a picnic like commas in a sentence that is otherwise gone. The giant water tower, painted with the town's name in cheerful block letters, has a moment of disbelief and then is not there in any useful way. Out on US 54, a tractor trailer lies on its side. A kidney-shaped lake beginning to form in the ditch from a water main now meaningless. The driver, who pulled it over when the wind told him who was in charge, crawls out of the sideways cab and into a world that is on the edge. He watches a piece of 2x4 go through the cab's windshield in a way that will find its way into safety videos and cannot likely ever be explained in words to his wife. The tornado does not care about the parts of a town that are themselves sentences. Friday night games. The knowing nods over library shelves. It flattens to the slab and moves on, carrying a slice of roof, a car hood, 1,000 splinters of red playground mulch. The NWS radars Dodge City, Wichita Sea. The debris lofted so high it becomes a separate planet. The forecaster says a word he never says at work, and then issues a fresh polygon anyway, because the storm is still cycling. The outbreak will take 2 more days in the plains. 100 more tornadoes fanned out like a book not yet shut. Under a mattress in a hallway on the north side of town, 2 brothers count a language their father taught them. 31, 32 and feel the air pressure return to normal the way a room breathes when you leave it. The hail stops because there is nowhere left to fall. The house around them is a floor plan and topography now. Somewhere, in the middle of everything, a calm arrives so sudden it is suspicious. The wedge pops. The roar becomes a gale, then a wind. Then a complicated silence, full of distant shouts and the groans of beams deciding they do not like being alone. The deputy, still alive on Garfield, puts his car in gear and finds the street he was on has become a path of clean concrete with no references left. He lifts the microphone and hears nothing. He drives anyway, because forward is the only direction that has any meaning. The town had been a map you could draw with your eyes closed. Now the map is a page torn out of a book. Survivors emerge like sleepers, waking in a room that somebody rearranged in the night. Doors open to nothing. Stairs reach up into air. Yards end at sky, where fences used to claim a piece of earth. It is still raining in intervals. The drops heavy and mean with dust. The smell of snapped pine and diesel, and the sweet stink of insulation ripped out of its long set. The light is wrong now. Neon now. No porch lamps. Only the flash of emergency strobes finding each other like small, stubborn stars. The first sound after the wind in many places is someone saying a name. Then another name. In some yards, the names find their owners. In others, the names become questions hardening into fact. A man kneels on a slab with a flashlight, trying to decipher the floor for the shape of where a couch used to be, because under that couch there was a toolbox, and in that toolbox is the only knife he is sure is still a knife. A woman climbs a staircase to air and stops, panting, because the climb is a habit, because her mind is not yet on speaking terms with gravity's new appointments. In what was the hospital, the hallway is a tent, a makeshift tunnel of mattresses and door slabs. Dalina and whoever could walk in the seconds after impact leaned into position. People are moving. That is success. Any count of that is better than the hushing kind of quiet. A doctor steps into the spray from a burst pipe and laughs once, because sometimes the universe gives you the one thing you need without you asking. He pushes his face into the water to wash grit from his eyes, then bends back to work. Someone brings a flashlight you could land a plane with, and the beam turns the air white. A radio crackles with a siren from another town. The deputy's headlights find a neighborhood he once canvassed for a missing Labrador. The Labrador looks up at him now, from under a table that somehow did not move, shivering. The deputy calls out, "Sheriff's office." Because people need the landmarks of language, and because it is his job to be a landmark when buildings fail. He hears a woman near the ground and kneels, and finds her under a tumble of 2x4s and vinyl siding. Her ankle is trapped. Behind her, the dark, is another room. Then the outside. He speaks low and slow and says her name twice when she tells it to him and says he will not leave. He does not leave. Power lines lie across the street like bad handwriting. They spit and blink and then lie still. Gas hisses under the fresh ruin, clean, sweet, dangerous. Somewhere, a pocket of fire takes the invitation, rooted in a natural gas line that would have run a furnace yesterday. The rain takes exception and puts it out. That is the rhythm, problem, and a little mercy. Small disaster. Then a counterpoint of someone arriving with the right thing in their hands. On the radio nets that do work, the words tornado emergency are repeated, now not as forecast but as fact. The State Highway Patrol closes US 54 in the dark. Fire departments from Haviland, Molinville, Pratt, and Points B and roll. Toward a town nobody can describe over the air. Search and rescue teams bring dogs with booties on their paws and tubes of liquid to wash ash from their eyes. The sirens in the next county sound. 2. Because the supercell still has appetites, it spins off satellites and successors. White ropes and stovepipes that do smaller, specific harm in fields and farmyards. The main wedge has moved on, a shadow stalking northeast into empty places. Then toward the little towns with big names: Maxville, Turrisdale, Hopewell-like. A history lesson in the making. It is not until someone stands on a rise where there had been a backyard play set and looks back at Greensburg that the scale enters a human head all at once. The town is flat, not just damaged, not just a street here and an alley there, but flattened, as if a thumb pressed it into the earth and lifted away clean. A water tower that had told travelers where they were is crumpled steel on a million maps. Grain bins are peeled open like sardine tins, wheat pouring into the street and becoming mud. The school is no longer a place where noise echoed. It is an outline of hallways and a smell of chemistry class. A family's safe room, a reinforced closet has survived. The door hinges bent, but the door hung on. Inside, 3 faces look out at a world that has no walls for a mile. The father says, "Stay," and climbs over what used to be his yard. The moon is somewhere behind the clouds, refusing to take a side. He picks up the lid of a Rubbermaid bin and uses it as a shovel because a shovel would be too easy to find tonight. To beguile a hand-dug hole into the aquifer. A lesson in persistence carved by men with shovels when a county was new, stands in a circle of ruin. Its museum brick displays photographs of men working in 1887 with their shirts off in summer heat has been unseen. The iron stairs still descend into the cool, into the water that does not care about surface weather. Somebody looks down and thinks, later, that if they had not had a basement, this would have done, and then hates himself for the thought, and then forgives himself, because thinking is a way to prove you survived. Dawn thinks about coming, and then delays. The sky fills and clears in patches, the tails of the supercell retreating. The cold front behind it, muscling in with a different, clean wind that finds every nailhead and makes a song. The first ambulance from Pratt threads its way past downed poles, through a town that has lost most of its nouns. They put a green tarp on the hood as a signpost for triage. Triage is the discipline of heartbreak. Who first? Who later? Who never? A teenage boy in a t-shirt and no shoes finds a medical kit he recognizes from his mother's car as it sits in the mud against a stop sign whose instructions are ironically the only thing intact. He carries the kit as if it is fragile because he has never been trusted with anything like it before. He brings it to the green tarp and a woman with blood on her cheek takes it and says, Good. It is the first time he has ever been told that in a way he immediately believes. At the NWO's office, the radar still paints the debris ball over the countryside beyond Greensburg. The colors elevated at a height inside the storm that means pieces of the town are still aloft. Still circling, still finding their way down over fields, where later a farmer will pick them up and read names off the backs of photographs and bring them back across county lines like stories. The forecaster looks at the screen and then at his hands and thinks about the polygon he drew, the words he chose, and the words the deputy used that mattered more because they were closer and carried breath and fear and love for a place you can draw with your eyes closed. The town, in pieces, becomes a verb. People move. They lift. They call. They lie down on their bellies to listen for voices. They bring out their last dry blankets and cut them in halves, and then into quarters. In the open, under the wrong light, a baby cries, and a woman gathers the sound up and says thank you to whatever God takes thank yous on nights like this. The rain picks up, then eases. At the edge of town, where things are only broken and not erased, the high beams of the first convoy from the state etch the new topography. They slow, because the road becomes a philosophy problem. How do you find a path when the lines have been taken away and replaced with something that does not care what your patterns were? They set their parking brakes and step out, and the smell is the same in every ruin since ruin began. Cut wood, spilled fuel, wet concrete, the hole where every kitchen used to make bread. When dawn finally commits, it arrives without the color everyone expected. It shows us what we already knew in our bones and could not place outside them in a few minutes. A single moving thing wrote itself across a town and then through it and then beyond it. And in its handwriting was the word erased. Morning is a list, long and unfair. It starts with the living. The first official staging area is a street corner nobody picked on purpose. It just happened the only corner of 4 blocks, with a pair of standing trees and a puddle that is not oil. Triaging works because people agree to let it. Men who have never taken orders take them. Women who have been in charge at home are in charge again now. The green tarp becomes a tent in someone's mind, and then it is a tent, a sheet strung between a ladder and what used to be a minivan's frame, and the minivan itself becomes a gurney until it's not. Search and rescue spreads like water into low places, pulling at the edges of silence. They work by sound and by dogs, and by the kinds of maps you rebuild with your eyes. Address numbers mean less than the rhythm of a block. A rescuer calls for quiet, and hears it come. A hush rippling outward down ruined streets, and into it the tiny sound of tapping from under insulation. They dig with hands, because hands are faster by the time you find the shovel. A boy with no shoes stands as close to the perimeter as he's allowed. He stares at the space where his school used to be, as if by staring long enough he can call it back. He will later be taught words like enhanced Fujita and velocity couplet, in the way children in flood towns learn what levee means before alphabet. But right now the world is simpler and harder. Right now, he learns that buildings lie. They say they are forever, until they are not. Television crews are still an hour away, but cell phone cameras capture everything, shaky and severe. A photo will be shared until it becomes a symbol. A pickup wedged in the branches of a splintered tree, its undercarriage exposed like a belly. A sidewalk so clean and intact it looks like it was poured yesterday and set in the exact shape of a house that is not there. A ghost of footprints in grit, leading off it toward a horizon that has had its lines erased. The aerial images that will run on every network later are already true without being seen. For block upon block, nothing stands taller than a human shoulder. Somewhere in the maze of lumber and rebar lives, a set of keys is found. The ring is heavy with history. The finder holds them up by reflex and then realizes there is nothing to unlock anymore. He slips them into his pocket because discarding them would feel like treason. The big well is a ring of history in a field of rupture. Someone leans over the stone lip and says, "Still there," with a relief so pure it feels like idiocy and at the same time is exactly right. In a town built on patience with the elements, the existence of a deep, steady water feels like a promise that not everything is at the mercy of the sky. At the makeshift operations center on the edge of town, a National Guard colonel with the crease of a life spent in command flips a map sideways and sketches with chalk on the asphalt. The chalk slides in grit. The plan is simple because it has to be. Grids, teams, flags in the corners, X on a slab when cleared. A pinned-up roster grows fat with names as neighbors show up with work gloves. There is no uniform to this army except the expression. which is the same one everywhere. Focus like a bit between your teeth. The dead are counted carefully and not discussed loudly. Numbers emerge softly in conversations under breath, and accounting in pencil until someone with a clipboard writes down what will be the opening line for every story about this night. 11 here, in this town. More, later, in the family of storms that spun out of the plains that weekend. The number is low compared to what it could have been. The number is a universe. People repeat the phrase that carries truth and mercy both. The sirens saved us. They repeat something else. A deputy drove the streets and yelled. He did. He is here, drinking water like he forgot how before today. By midday, the sun is a hard glare on bare concrete. Dust rises in a glitter you can taste. Masks appear leftover N95s from farm shops, oil-stained bandanas, wet t-shirts, tied across faces because lungs are too precious to give away on a Friday. People who never wore hard hats wear hard hats and learn the geometry of walking on a landscape where nails are flowers. The police set a perimeter not because the town fears thieves in a conventional sense, but because too many cars will mean a tangle of good intentions. In the jangled grid of turned-over street signs, human traffic makes its own map. From due west, help multiplies. Fire trucks, ambulances, a flatbed stacked with pallets of water. A box truck labeled with the name of a grocery store, whose manager woke up crisp with the knowledge that today his job had one item on the list. On the hood of that box truck, a woman sets up a ledger and writes down what comes in and what goes out. Because order is kindness, the Red Cross sets a table and it becomes a shelter. A literal place for blankets to be put around bone-cold shoulders in the middle of May. The church whose sanctuary is roofless holds service anyway in a parking lot littered with shingles. The sermon is short and human like a hand on a back. The NWS survey teams arrive, measuring not with instruments but with eyes trained in a different kind of measurement foundation. Bolts sheared, cars thrown, trees debarked, and denuded. They read the damage indicators like text. F5, they will say, and that will matter later. We'll make sense of insurance and records and the country's need to fit its tragedies into boxers. For now, EF5 is a shorthand for winds that bend steel and for a track nearly 30 miles long, in which the center of Greensburg was taken apart down to near nothing. Afternoon brings a rumor of more storms, and everyone watches the western edge of the world. The sky there is clean. Relief shows itself in breaths, taken all the way to the bottom. Men on ladders cluck at each other across the flat plain that used to be neighborhoods as if they are on adjacent roofs. Someone has the nerve to make a joke it's terrible, and it does what jokes do. It lets the air out of a room so that more air can get in. The work becomes repetitive. Repetition is a mercy and a danger. People lift where they lifted an hour ago. Look where they looked. They find a goldfish alive in a puddle, carry it in a mason jar, and hand it to a child like a talisman. They find a wedding dress in a tree and drape it over a branch with a gentleness that seems to surprise them. They find a letter, the script looping and familiar, and the person whose name is on the envelope reads until the end, and then tucks the paper into a pocket where the words can keep vibrating. By evening, floodlights have been dragged onto corners that used to have corners. The county fairgrounds, a dozen miles away, become a city of cots. The air tastes like rain again. A father, his knuckles scraped raw, sits on the tailgate of a borrowed truck and counts the people he loves with his fingers. He has to start over because his hand shakes. He gets to the end of the list and looks up at a sky that, for the first time in a day, looks like weather for sleeping. At the edge of disaster, there is always a slope where the present is steep and the future levels off. Greensburg reaches that slope by duck. The cameras find the story and tell it with drone shots and earnest stand-ups under bowl caps. They say wiped off the map, and it is not wrong, and also not right, because making a new map is already underway. What comes next is its own kind of weather, political, economic, personal end. It gathers in the whispers at dusk. Rebuild? How? With what? Where would you even start? Someone says, we start tomorrow. Someone else says, we already started. They are both right. Night draws a curtain. Under it, the last aftershock storms of the outbreak snake into the Great Plains, spotting fields with new grief. Greensburg sleeps in a way that is not sleep, but is the human version of turning the generator off to listen for leaks. The air is weirdly sweet. A dog barks once, then remembers there are fewer edges to bounce sound from, and stops. On a slab that was a kitchen, a battery radio whispers news. First EF5 on the new scale, 1.7 miles wide, 95% of town damaged or destroyed. Numbers that will become the bones of future documentaries slide into the ears of the people who are the story itself. The voices on the radio praise sirens and deputies and God and luck. They will not yet praise the thing that has just begun under floodlights and tarps and scabbed knuckles. The choice to build again. Recovery is a calendar and a vow. It starts in the small hours, with coffee brewed on camp stoves, and a meeting the mayor. Council members with their hair codes switched into ball caps. State officials with clipboards and eyes wider than their training under a canvas awning that was a farmer's market too. Saturdays ago. The first decision is practical and huge. Where to put the debris. The second is stranger, but just as big. Who are we now? The logistics feel like an engineering class taught by grief. Streets are cleared by marching order. The perimeter extends, block by block. Insurance adjusters arrive. Pale and apologetic. The number 95% repeats, until it ceases to mean anything. 95% of businesses and homes destroyed or damaged. A fraction so more than half. That half feels insulting. The Red Cross badges multiply. The county courthouse sets up office in a trailer. Paper becomes a boat people climb into together, and forms float over a flood of need. NWS surveys conclude and publish EF5. Violent. Winds estimated at over 200 miles per hour. A damaged path on the ground, cutting the town into before and after. The radar images with the debris ball become the new icon, replacing the postcard of the Big Wells iron staircase that used to sit on the counter at the cafe. There is a press conference. The forecaster from Dodge City stands in front of the microphones and explains the phrase tornado emergency to a nation that will now understand it. He keeps his voice even when someone asks whether more could have been done. He says the sirens and the warning and citizens seeing the sky saved countless lives. He's right. Of the dead, 11 are named in church bulletins and at folding tables. The stories are specific and enormous. A farmer who stayed to help a neighbor in a house with no basement. A woman who couldn't leave her dogs and save two, but not herself. A young man throwing shoulders into a door until walls left him nothing to push against. Their funerals filled the fairgrounds, and the air smells like diesel and cologne and wet dust. The country watches for a week, and then for a season, because the cameras know this one is different. An American town reduced to slabs, and then Then the remarkable sentence is said with a kind of simple ferocity usually reserved for wedding vows. If we build, we will build better. In meetings at Blur and in grant applications at Rewrite Half a Lexicon, Greensburg puts its flag in the ground. Sustainable, efficient, wind-ready. The choice to go green is not a slogan. It is physics and revenge. If the sky taught them a lesson, they decide to lower their energy bills for the next half-century and build houses that breathe right. City Hall is rebuilt. Lead platinum. So are the school and the hospital. The hospital returns as a critical access facility swung into the future. Daylighting, high-performance glass, geothermal under the slab. A business incubator rises where a hardware store once sold pipe and twine. It hums with ideas that would have seemed pretentious in a town of 1,400 before May, and now feel like survival. The wind farm on the rise west of town erects a row of turbines that pay the town back whenever the planes do what the planes do best. The streetlights sip. The roofs shed. Somewhere, a builder who used to frame Baia learns about our values and tells his crew this is the new scripture. The Big Well gets a new museum around it, a low, bright building that celebrates the hand-dug circle and the stubbornness it stands for. It becomes not simply a tourist stop, but a civic catechism. Look what hands can do. Look how deep the past goes. Look how the present can build a ring of protection around something essential. Visitors descend the stairs and catch their breath in the cool. The well itself, indifferent, reflects a new ceiling, new glass, a new set of faces peering down and thinking about 1887 and 2007 at once. There is a Mines of Moria quality to the first winter everyone in borrowed houses of wood and wrap. The wind doing its constant committee work. The laughter in the rebuilt school a little too loud as if to prove it can be. Then spring finds the empty lots and teachers' children in short sleeves. The uncertain art of not assuming loss will appear out of the west every evening. Grass grows back on places it shouldn't and in cracks like patience. Trees are planted in parades of shovels. Saplings look insulting against the sky. And then they don't. Some leave. Some always leave. Others return from places they went, because that is how exiles work, when the letter arrives that says we are making a thing again. Come. The town's population edges back toward what it was, but is never exactly itself again, which is honest. The rebuilt houses have double stud walls and porches that face the wind because facing the wind makes the wind love you less. The alleys are new, the street names the same. The fire hydrants, brightly painted against the gray memory in everyone's head. The outbreak that weekend produced more than 100 tornadoes. Other towns bear scars. Other families repeat their lists of names on anniversaries and no cameras come. But Greensburg becomes, unfairly and usefully, the shorthand. It appears in textbooks and on conference panels where people who used to weigh hogs explain how to weigh a kilowatt. It is rolled into the bigger American conversation about building codes and warnings and how to talk people into basements. It is held up by both sides of arguments about climate and adaptation, and somehow the town manages to ignore that most days and just live. Years later. A boy, one of the two who counted under a mattress in the hallway, walks the sidewalk where his house used to be and where his house is again. He knows the line where the slab was because it is under the grass like a bone. He has learned the names of clouds and of storm motions and, more importantly, the names of his neighbors who hammered beside his father in the heat. He carries a wrench to help fix a bike and crosses a street that runs again to a school that hums and a cafe that sells a pie that tastes exactly like the pie from before because some arts insist on continuity and bless them for it. The loaded phrases of 2007 have all the air let out and become facts. EF5. 1.7 miles wide. 95%. 11th deaths. More in the outbreak. They sit under newer words in Greensburg like footings. Lead geothermal. Wind farm. The town is a case study and a place you can be from. Both. And the combination is rarer than it should be. On an anniversary evening, the town gathers at twilight. Because twilight is when the plains feel like a high ceiling a person can stand beneath. And think big. Without a voice echoing. The deputy, older, stands near the stage. A forecaster from Dodge City stands there too, looking at faces he has thought of many times since a Friday in May when he said tornado emergency and meant it like an oath. Lena sits on a folding chair, a lanyard on that says volunteer, because that's what nurses are when the doors come off. The pastor says fewer words than a person might say under less of a sky. There is a minute of silence, then a siren once. A long rise and fall end. The town is something no camera can really catch. It stays. They say a single tornado erased an entire U.S. town, and the photographs make that phrase easy to believe. But erasing is the wrong verb for a place whose people are this stubborn. The wedge took structures. It took a skyline and a catalog of small inheritances. It took 11 hearts on one night, and more on those that followed. What it did not take was the thing a town is when the buildings are elsewhere. A consensus about how to belong to each other. We tell disaster stories because memory without narrative is just weight. Greensburg's weight is real. Its narrative is better that warnings shouted and broadcast matter, that basements and interior holes and mattresses and hands on someone else's bike matter. That rebuilding as if tomorrow matters is not a luxury but a choice a small town on the high plains can make and then live in. On the way out of town, the new water tower flashes BR, clean shape against a big sky. It says Greensburg, in letters that want to be seen from 30 miles. Beyond it, turbines turn in a wind that has no opinions. The big well waits patiently beneath its new roof. Water in a stone ring dug by human hands. In a dry time, still catching whatever falls into it, still reflecting faces. The sky to the west is messy with cumulus, golden at their rims. The sirens are quiet. The town breathes. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that change the world.